Ranking Member Britt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of Ranking Member Scott and my fellow Republican colleagues, we'd like to welcome Senator Butler as the newest member of this committee. On October 7th, it's a date that will forever live in infamy. It's been nearly 3 weeks since Hamas terrorists crossed into Israel to attack our great ally and our friend. Make no mistake, this was an act of pure evil. I just returned from a trip from Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Egypt just this past weekend. I traveled with a bipartisan group of colleagues to send a message loud and clear to the world that the United States of America stands with Israel. We saw firsthand what was truly unimaginable. These barbaric terrorists wore GoPro cameras as they committed these atrocities. So you can watch as babies were decapitated, children shot to death in front of their parents, parents slaughtered in front of their children, young women raped, entire families burned to death, daughters and sons, sisters and brothers kidnapped and taken into Gaza as hostages and human shields. Over 1,400 innocent people were murdered in Israel that day, and more than 200 were taken hostage. The State Department reports that at least 10 Americans remain as hostages and that at least 33 U.S. citizens were killed on October 7th. As we sit here, we know who committed these acts of evil, these acts of terror, Hamas. And we know who funds them and trains them. That's the Iranian regime. That brings me to why we are here today. This committee has jurisdiction over our nation's economic national security tools, including sanctions. We must use every tool at our disposal to ensure that those who carried out these attacks and those who financially supported them will never be able to do that again. This committee is also responsible for providing oversight to ensure that every administration enforces the laws that safeguard our national security and the security of our allies. That includes holding the administration accountable when it chooses to waive or neglect those tools. That is why I would like to echo Ranking Member Scott's request that Treasury Secretary Yellen testify before this committee as soon as possible. There is no question that Iran is complicit in supporting Hamas. Remember, evil cannot exist if the good are unafraid. Iran is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, providing hundreds of millions of dollars to support organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah, as well as military training, weapons, and munitions. Despite decades of Iranian support for similar atrocities, including those that have killed Americans, the Biden administration has opted to continue the failed policies of appeasement that began during the Obama administration. We all know that money is fungible. Despite the administration's claim that when you release $6 billion to Iran, that frees up an equivalent of $6 billion in other funds to be dedicated somewhere else, such as supporting proxy terrorists in Gaza. The administration should permanently restrict these funds. But since they were recklessly willing to release them in the first place, I urge all of my colleagues here today to support Ranking Member Scott's Revoke Iranian Funding Act, of which I'm an original co-sponsor, and this would take care of it. The administration took actions last week to sanction a number of Hamas operatives and financial facilitators, but it was too little too late for what happened on October 7th. How long has the administration known about these financiers of terror and yet failed to act? These are answers that we need from Secretary Yellen. The executive branch largely has the tools it needs to sanction state sponsors of terrorism. This administration needs to actually use those tools that are in their toolbox and enforce them. We need to return to a maximum pressure posture towards Iran, imposing bone-crushing, comprehensive sanctions that squeeze Iran financially dry. I also want to address one more important topic about this issue here at home, in a literal sense. On college campuses and in cities across the country, including this week in our nation's capital city, and even in the halls of Congress, we have seen anti-Semitic protests justifying and even glorifying the actions of Hamas. This is spreading propaganda, and it is absolutely unacceptable. I never thought that in the United States of America, in this time, we would struggle to just call evil, evil. The actions of Hamas should not be applauded, celebrated, or praised by any American. They are not only contrary to the core values of our nation, but to every fiber in our being. Remember, the state of Israel was created following the Holocaust so that Jewish people would never have to hide again. But yet that is what we are seeing happen today. And as Americans, we pledge since World War II, never again. Since October 7th, that promise has been under attack both in Israel and here at home. We have a moral obligation to fulfill our promise, and that under our watch, never again means never again. And I will wrap up by saying, I have sat in rooms with families whose loved ones are being held hostage twice, both here in the United States and when I was in Israel just a few days ago. You see pictures like this of precious Abigail, 3 years old, that Hamas is using as a human shield, who, when you learn her story and the story of the remaining hostages, it will tear your heart out. We must do more. This committee has the power to help ensure this never happens again. This committee has the power to prove that America still knows good from evil. I look forward to hearing from today's witnesses about solutions, ways that we can work together that will allow the United States to stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel, projecting unwavering American strength to deter more hostile aggression, and hold accountable both those who carried out these terrorist attacks and those who supported them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.